Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, watch a Doctor Who story chosen by a friend of mine, drop in facts and observations, all the while trying to guess what their favourite things about each episode might be.
Hello, Toby, and hello, Happy Times and Places listeners. My name is Joe Ford, and Toby and I first came into contact when he recorded one of my podcast episodes about a year ago for Frontiers, the podcast called Hamster with Blunt Penknife, which is also a commentary podcast. And he enjoyed it so much, or so he tells me, that he came back and recorded another one for Army of Ghost and Doomsday, which he seems to have forgotten about, but it was actually one of my most listened to episodes. So Toby, go back to listen to that one because it's really good. Okay, and before I tell you the story that I am going to select, I want to just very quickly say that it's a great honor to be able to do this on Happy Times and Places because it is my personal favorite podcast. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I have tried to do solo commentaries myself, and it is an exhausting endeavor. And it's something that Toby does particularly well, with intelligence and humility and vulnerability, which is what I really, really like, is that Toby, you allow your audience to see you completely bare. And I don't mean naked. You know what I mean. If you're having a bad day, you say you're having a bad day and why. And I feel like it's very easy to kind of put on a mask and kind of go a bit game show with podcasting. And I just love the fact that we kind of have stripped back Toby Haydock with tons of trivia, lots of stories about the actors. And I really love how you focus on the actors, not just the main actors, but the guest stars as well. Yeah, I love Happy Times and Places. And so I wanted to say thank you for providing me with hours of entertainment and for allowing me this opportunity. Right, so the story I have chosen today is the Jodie Whittaker story. I've chosen this because I feel that the 13th Doctor is, or I was about to say underrepresented, but I think it's unrepresented on Happy Times and Places. So I have chosen the Series 12 opener, Spyfall. And I have chosen that because I think that Chris Chibnall has set off this new season on exactly the right foot. It's a globe-trotting, balls to the wall Bond parody, huge budget, like enormous production value, great twists and turns, like action set pieces. It's pure entertainment, and I think it's something that was neglected a little bit in series 11. So I think he does a lot of things in Spyfall, which kind of ties into the things that I've chosen to rectify that in series 12. I just think this is full of pizzazz and spunk, and it's just a delight to watch. And I think the second episode doesn't disappoint either. So yeah, Spyfall is what we are going to be talking about today.
Well, that was the lovely Joe Ford, and I've just listened to what he said, and very touched. I enjoy appearing on Joe's podcasts, and he's a lovely, lovely fellow. Although I think we've only met in the flesh once, maybe twice, at the BFI, and then only fleetingly. We've not spent any proper social time together, but we always chitter-chatter when I do his podcasts, and I've since done more than that. I've appeared on his Strictly Come Hamster a couple of times, which is a sort of one where you vote stories from a season through until you reach a consensus on what is the best, etc. It's a bit of a mix of the format, but it's enjoyable. And I've done one of those on the Christmas specials that I wasn't very good on, actually, because I didn't feel clued up enough, and I was on more comfortable ground with season 1, which I've got to know better and better and better, having done Happy Times and Places on the stories and also the deep dives for Too Much Information. So I feel like I've got to know season 1 very well of late. I've just emerged from doing a Happy Times and Places on the Censorites, and now it's alliteratively I'm jumping to Spyfall, which is the second, actually, because Joe recorded this a while ago. That he hadn't forgotten that I'd done Strictly Come Hamster when he recorded that. I hadn't done it because I've banked a lot of these contributions from the people choosing their favourite things, whilst so some of those sadly are somewhat out of date, because I asked everyone, sort of pretty much at the same time, and they come in as and when, and then suddenly it's 3 years later. But so by when Joe recorded that, I hadn't done The Woman Who Fell to Earth, which Thomas Guerrier chose, which is appropriately the first Jodie Whittaker era story to come under, I was going to say go under the knife. It's not that at all. It's to be welcomed into my happy time and place. But with the caveat that, and I'm going to make this brief because I've got an hour ahead of me, and it's an hour of an episode that I don't know as well as I might know an episode from season 1 of Doctor Who, where I might have interviewed half the cast or made a documentary or, watched over and over again, and have, some of what this is about, isn't it? Is about saying, well, I first encountered this when I was a boy, and we can all, identify with where we first were when we discovered, the wonders of old Doctor Who. Well, I watched this as a grown-up. I didn't have to discover it. It was on the telly. And, it doesn't have any of that childhood wonder either. And, as will become apparent, I do struggle at the moment because I hated the Sylvester McCoy era when it went out. I hated Peter Davison when he was Doctor Who, and I'm greatly fond of the McCoy era now, and Peter Davison is one of my favourite Doctors. So I know that we change. But I currently, the Chibnall era is one I struggle with for reasons that I'm sure will become apparent. But I go into this with the whole point of this is to celebrate, to accentuate the positive, and where I might not be as positively inclined about a story or an era, my guest will hopefully push me in the right direction, and if not, I'll die trying. So, yeah, I'm not here to bash, and we'll maybe discuss that as well, because I've just come off the back of doing podcasts about the latest series, the next series one, the first of the Shooty Gatwa, Russell T Davies axis of entertainment, and tried to do not commentaries, but tried to do sort of whimsical musings or at least positively motivated reactions to those, where I go off on tangents, and that has been sort of queried by some listeners, and I think quite often not listeners, but people that just want to, that don't like modern Doctor Who and want to say so, and will use the space of the internet that I hang about in to say it for reasons, well, for I guess understandable reasons, because we, if we see a thing and we want to say it, we can now do that. We can post our commentary where we're reacting to something, or we think it might get seen, or whatever. That's fine, and one just has to take that in one stride. But I think that will be an interesting thing to consider when I'm talking about my reaction to this and why we react to things in certain ways. But that said, in preparation for this, because it's not an episode I'm hugely familiar with, I've probably only seen it 2 or 3 times, I have just this morning watched, and I haven't watched part 2 yet, I've watched part 1 only so far, I thought I'd do it that way, of Spyfall, and so with it fresh in my memory, we will embark. But I have to say, I enjoyed it, and I'm not just saying this, and again, I think it's partially to do with the mood we set ourselves up to be in, not always. I enjoyed it, but with still serious caveats about the major shortcomings I think that this era has. I really enjoyed it, I have to say. I really enjoyed it as a piece of entertainment and as a piece of Doctor Who, and so hopefully I will have plenty to say. But I've deliberately kept this opening short, he says, noticing it's clocked in at 5 minutes, so not that bloody short. Let us watch Spyfall, Part 1, which I am going to press play on in 3, 2, 1. Well, the first thing that comes apparent is that this is a South African location. I think it's very artfully, it's West Africa in Doctor Who terms, but I wonder how these bits of font will date, because they're not. I don't see them as particularly of our time, but maybe they will look to be of our time when we view them in 20 years' time. But I quite like them. But this is obviously South Africa. It's not obviously South Africa, but if you know about how these things were made, this is making use of the South African location that is used for a few episodes in this era, where certain scenes have clearly been earmarked to make use of that location, and so part of the fun is spotting which actors were employed in South. Well, part of my fun. So that actress there playing the sniper, Melissa de Vries. Shares her surname with Hans de Vries, who's a Cyberman in Tomb of the Cybermen, later acted under the name of Luke Hansen, screen tested for Bond. Let's not get into that. But the other de Vries is in Doctor Who, Mr. de Vries, of course, played by Nicholas McArdle in The Stones of Blood. However, Melissa de Vries, there's a South African actress filming in South Africa, whereas these actors here on the aeroplane, which is obviously a studio in Cardiff, or well, I don't know what it is, but it's certainly in the UK production base, are UK-based actors, which is why this is the actress we see on the slab later and not the sniper, because you wouldn't have to, because the slab where C shows what's happened to this spy is in the UK, not in South Africa. And of course this is a stock shot, presumably, of Moscow, Russia, in case you don't know where Russia is. But no, I like this very sort of spies getting knocked off. My partner and I have just done all of the Mission Impossibles because she'd not seen any of them. So we watched the latest one and she really enjoyed it. And we don't often agree. We have to work quite hard to find something that we both like, and there's a bit of compromise on both sides. She doesn't want to watch Juliet Bravo, for goodness sake. What's wrong with her? And I don't want to watch things about people crying or women bonding. But we both enjoyed the Mission Impossible film, so maybe I'm in a spy-y mood. I do like the woo-woos of Sega Nakanola's version of the theme. I think they're amongst the more successful ooh-woos, to use a technical term, of modern Who theme tunes. I'm not sure about the bubbly underscore. I think it's all right. I think this theme is fine. It's atmospheric. I don't think it has... See, the Doctor Who theme, it's tricky, isn't it? Because it has to have drive and excitement, but also be spooky and atmospheric. And those two things don't often go together. Sheffield, Yorkshire. I mean, there is something quite funny, isn't there, about, Moscow, Russia, Sheffield, Yorkshire. But in the way that television is done these days, I think the Sheffield setting is a worthy one to have, because so often things are set in either London or, if they're being really avant-garde, Manchester or maybe Scotland, but it's nice that Sheffield is the sort of anchor of this period of Doctor Who. I think it just gives it a certain something. Here's dyspraxic when it suits them, Ryan, and this is his friend Thibaut, isn't it, who comes back in a later episode. And so we've had that exciting opening of the spies being sort of knocked out. So that's our initial hook, which I think works very nicely. And I think one of the most successful elements of this episode, because obviously Spyfall is a pun on Skyfall, which is the James Bond. I'm never sure about Doctor Who too openly sort of displaying its sources. But I'm in two minds about that, because also, I think Doctor Who is really successful in the Hinchcliffe era, where it, is sometimes very heavily and obviously influenced by that classic horror film or that classic piece of literature. But I suppose it's like in Planet of Evil, if they called Professor Sorensen Professor Eckel, and do you have something to hide, Professor Eckel, but then again, they do that with Jackson and the Argonauts, don't they? And they even mention it out loud in Underworld. But I think it's nice to ape a classic, but I think you don't have to be too knowing about it. Although I do like the odd postmodern wink. So I don't know. Maybe we're too close to it. I don't know how I feel about Spyfall. It's certainly a better pun than Arachnids in the UK, but I didn't mind that either. But a lot of people hated that as a title. I didn't mind that. But Spyfall, it's a bit like the latest, the episode Rogue, where instead of having lovely little sort of echoes of Bridgerton, they basically went, yeah, we like Bridgerton, in the same way that was nearly a Christmas special where which had J.K. Rowling in it. That would have been interesting to view in hindsight. This is Andrew Bone, appropriately playing a doctor, Sawbones, but he plays quite a lot of doctors. I remember looking it up at the time, and he'd got 3 credits in a row that had him playing a doctor. But this is where I have one of the issues with the era. I think is Graham's cancer is a sort of a bit of a sort of shorthand to he's a bit of a sad man, but they don't actually do anything with it. I had thought that maybe the twist in the final episode of his first season would be that actually he wasn't in remission and that he was travelling through time because he hadn't got long left, or they would do something. But I find they quite often invoke these big storytelling strokes, cancer or dyspraxia or the kid with dyslexia in the first episode of Chris Chibnall's Silurian story, but not the second, as if they're a sort of shorthand to something meaningful, but actually nothing meaningful is particularly done with them. This I like the Doctor sort of underneath the TARDIS, mending it a bit like a car. I think that's quite fun, and I do like the Men in Black stuff. You see, slight unease about the obvious echo with Spyfall, but the sort of iconography of conspiracy theory stuff, Men in Black in Doctor Who, is pretty cool to me, and a lot of this echoes the X-Files, which is a series I'm fond of, but also has its own problems, but has some of its own ties with watching this as well. But there is a kind of X-Files-y feel. I like anything that has a sort of conspiracy that goes right up to the top, because that leaves our heroes on their own, and that leaves them fighting against the establishment, so you can have lots of subtext there, as well as the wonderfully practical thing of going, they're cut off and they can't ask the bigwigs for help. And it's the plucky, in inverted commas, ordinary people saving the day. Although, of course, Doctor Who is extraordinary, but that's sort of the point. Doctor Who is extraordinary, but without being, without being part of the best ship in the fleet or all of that. So I like a conspiracy thriller. I like the mystery, Men in Black sort of stuff. And this is quite a nice opening, having everyone getting gathered up. Bringing the team back together, the fam, if you insist. Which how do I feel about fam? I'm not. It's fine, I suppose. It's you have to mix up the you have to mix up the dynamic so that not everything is the same as has gone before, and I have to be very conscious that some of the things I might struggle with in this era are because I'm a middle-aged man, and I am watching a show that, it's supposed to appeal to everybody in the family, but it's also supposed to appeal to young people. And one of the things about getting older is that young people frighten or baffle one. So some things that are designed to appeal to them, one might even resent, especially if it's the thing that you liked when you were young. So I'm always conscious of that as well. So bear in mind when I'm saying aspects of things that I struggle with. I am aware that my answers are not definitive, and I'm not necessarily right. I'm just, as Joe very kindly said, I'll be sort of open and honest. And he said I was vulnerable, didn't I? I was a bear, and I mean I am recording this naked. Make of that what you will. Well, I could be. You never know. I thought that was really good. Actually, the direction of this episode is excellent. Jamie Magnus Stone, who directed that sort of preview film, with the Gallifreyan soldiers of the 50th anniversary episode. So, but he does a good job here. I think that having the car going backwards down the motorway is in keeping with the Mission Impossible, the James Bond, the sort of spy films that this is homaging, and I think it's almost a surprise we've not had that before, although there is a sort of spooks thriller type of feel to Last of the Time Lord's Sound of Drums, which I also think is really, really effective, that Colin Teague directs. Here is Stephen Fry. Finally in Doctor Who, he was the Minister of Chance, wasn't he, in Death Comes to Time. He was going to write an episode for Russell T Davies's first season back in 2005 that gradually got pushed back and then just didn't happen. I think Russell did say that it just didn't quite work, and that's the thing, which is why I do think, actually, much as we sometimes hope that, the great leading writers of our time and big brains of our time might get to grips with Doctor Who. I actually think somebody who writes really good episodes of Casualty, who's allowed to suddenly write about aliens and spaceships things, might sometimes be a better choice, because they've got the nuts and bolts of television. But Franklin is an extra. He does get a credit on IMDb. I don't know if he put it there or not, but he doesn't get a credit because he whispers, which is a way of saving a few quid on an actor. And there's a few, a speaking part, which is there's a few ways that modern television gets very adept at doing this these days. He's got a very good supercilious look about him, though. Well done, Franklin, in the back. Stephen Fry, yes, finally in Doctor Who. And there was this weird, I'd forgotten all about it. And then about a year ago, somebody on Twitter put up the announcement. I mean, and this some of the things that happened at this time with Doctor Who were quite baffling, I have to say. They announced the two guest stars for this story, Stephen Fry and Lenny Henry, basically having them standing in front of a scrunched up, unironed white sheet with a sort of, somebody pulls a light switch and this sort of bare light bulb. It's like they've been shut in a cupboard and they've been under interrogation and are now about to be shot. And it's the cheapest, most embarrassing. It doesn't even have that sort of clandestine, oh, look who we've got. It really is get the runner to shove the two poor sods at the tea break into a cupboard and get them to look slightly apologetic about the fact that Doctor Who's starting again. It was a really baffling way of announcing two, exciting. Doctor Who's always managed, I think, to handle. I mean, I remember the everybody being very cross, myself included, when Ken Dodd was cast in Delta and the Bannermen, although, actually, with the passage of time, and if you don't know who he is, he fits in just as well as anybody else. But I would argue that at that time, Doctor Who didn't need to be diluting its credibility anymore. But Doctor Who has generally been able to handle casting people best known for comedic work within it, which is although Doctor Who is funny, but in serious and straight parts, and that's part of its, because dissonance. Doctor Who works well with dissonance. So seeing a well-known comic face being serious, or in a serious context, helps to sort of go, oh, this is a world we recognise, but it's slightly strange, and it's also slightly quirky. Now, I know Stephen Fry has done much serious acting, and he was in one of the series of 24 playing the Prime Minister, but he's largely known as a sort of comic presence, and he's certainly a recognisable person. And Doctor Who has always managed to take that, because Doctor Who is larger than life, and it's just how you balance that with the tone. Getting the chemical formula of Doctor Who right is very hard. But I don't think casting Lenny Henry and Stephen Fry is a problem or reduces the show's credibility. I think it's part of saying this is a kind of national treasure program, but it's also a program where you will see familiar things in unfamiliar circumstances, where comedic presences may be doing serious things. And, some of our best performances in the show sometimes come from people, going against what they normally do. And I think that's the beauty of Doctor Who, and why people enjoy doing it so, is because you get to do what you don't get to do in most other programs, and sometimes, if something strange happens in Doctor Who that I might sort of wince at, I might go, no, because the reason I celebrate Doctor Who is to go, this is the program where you can have that thing that dares you to say it's silly, but actually isn't. I do like all this this sort of wordplay stuff, but and of course we had the moment where the stuffy establishment figure was like, Doctor Who should be a man, and she goes, well, I'm a lady now and I've had an upgrade. Now, I've seen that used by cross people, and I do sort of understand that it's one thing to say, okay, we're going to enter the 21st century and there should be more positive role models for women and more diverse casting and that sort of thing, but to then go, I've had an upgrade, you can do that thing without you can strive for equality without necessarily, because yes, I know middle-aged white men have probably dominated drama for the past 20 or 30 years, but as a middle-aged white man now, I haven't. I don't. I don't. I've. I feel the struggle. The implication that somehow, because men of my ilk in the past have prospered, some unjustly or where they shouldn't, or despite not being as talented as other people who might have done the job just as well. I don't think when we've redressed that balance, or in the process of redressing that balance, and say having a female doctor, you don't have to kind of do a joke that sort of says men are rubbish as well, because that kind of takes away from the point you're making, that prejudice is bad and people shouldn't be judged because of their gender and any other sort of immutable characteristic, and the patriarchy, as it were, existed because men supposedly thought they were better than everybody else, when actually, anybody can be doctor, anybody can be this, anybody can be that. Absolutely anybody, not anybody, but So I think gracefulness in victory it perhaps makes your point better, but I only say that because I think I'm doing that thing that I counsel myself not to do, and I did before I was thinking of this, of going, because I see some fans of this era, for example, saying very idiotic things, but I also see fans of my demographic saying idiotic things as well, and sometimes horribly racist and sexist things. So actually, I shouldn't be couching my observations through the prism of the very worst people on either side, and I should, but it's so hard not to do, isn't it? So with that aside, let's leave that there, and take this for what it is, not for what the very worst people might take it to be. The lighting in this story is, I think, very good. I don't like this TARDIS set particularly. I'm not a great fan of organics in the TARDIS anyway. I wasn't wild about the first one, with the coral and all of that. I much prefer a Heath Robinson, the kind of the spaceship made out of a library, rather than it is grown from a loom, or we grew this spaceship out of a seed and all of that. I don't know that. I prefer the slightly more Heath Robinson, that bric-a-bracy junkyardy kind of vibe. I like switches that have been replaced by chess pieces and the manual typewriter. I love the TARDIS of the TV movie, and also those. I mean, they look good in that scene when they were lit up, but those ice spiders' legs, I think, are pretty naff. So here we go. I don't get. It's weird. Tosin Cole is a good actor, and he's doing some. He's good at, got a lead in a show in the States and everything like that. But Ryan's a tricky character, isn't he? I think it's hard to play. I think he's quite a hard part to play, and I know there are people that give him a lot of stick. I think and I don't think he's doing his own accent either, is he? But Ryan, I don't think Ryan is one of the more successful characters. Although I think he does this well. I think he does the sort of slightly awkward, nervous stuff here actually very well. I think that's really hard, and I think that's hard not to look like an idiot do it, and you have to be quite brave as an actor actually to make yourself sort of convincingly awkward, because people go, oh, is that awkward acting? So actually, having said that, I think he can sometimes come across as a bit flat, but I think that is part of that characterization, where he's fairly trusting and fairly straightforward, but also dyspraxic and awkward and all of those things. I'm getting more amused by these signs. We keep having them. Great thing. And of course, here we are in South Africa again. Now, I'd been told that Sacha Dhawan was the master, but I remember watching this kind of forgetting halfway through. It's a bit like when I watched Army of Ghosts and the Daleks appeared at the end. I'd seen that black Dalek. I'd pretty much certain the Daleks were therefore coming back. I knew the Master was coming back in Utopia, but I was still sort of slightly thrilled when it happened. So it's funny when you can. I do like the O joke. I do think that works. That's a nice little Doctor Who gag. I think that's quite fun. But anyway, I'm sure we'll get on to the Master. But I definitely knew this, and I don't think he'd been mentioned in the cast lists in advance. So I think he was a surprise, even though he wasn't a surprise because I then remembered. Oh yeah, no, he's the Master. But anyway, we are in South Africa here because this is a couple of South African actors, which is why they can't go inside, because I'm assuming the interiors were done back in the UK. But yeah, so we have two South African actors. I don't know why this interests me, but it does, because there's a certain sort of practicality that needs to be considered when you're putting these sorts of scripts together to go, okay, well, if these two security guards are going to be filming exteriors in South Africa, we can't be flying them over to do interiors, so let's get them on the radar. And I like that, the sort of solving of those things. That's very much, reminds me of the stuff we discovered about old Doctor Who when we were learning about, who could appear when people were appearing on film and might be different in the studio, or actors having to re-record the cliffhangers or not, or them having to cleverly redo a cliffhanger in a certain way so you didn't have to rehire the actor and all that sort of thing. There are examples of that. So Darren, Meyer and Dominique, I think it's pronounced Meyer as well, although they're spelt differently. I think Darren Meyer maybe and Dominique Meyer as Cisse and Browning are South Cape Town based actors playing Australian, so I think that's rather fun. And you have it with some of the actors in Rosa, and so there are various actors that when we come to look at the history of Doctor Who, they probably won't be there won't be as many signed photos of them or as much of them at signings in Chiswick or convention appearances here and there, or just popping up in theatres where you can hang around the stage door to meet them, because they're based in South Africa. So it's a bit like when I was just recently talking about the Censorites and Ilona Rogers, who's a New Zealand actress based in Australia, who's in the Censorites and watching Australian shows like Prisoner and Anzacs, where and suddenly being really pleasantly surprised to see Doctor Who actors turn up in them, because there are a handful of Doctor Who actors who, for one reason or another, were in the Antipodes, either because they'd returned home or because they'd gone there afterwards, and they all have interesting stories in and of themselves. And I might do a podcast about that one day. The South African element is another one that we have certain actors in stories who are obviously locally cast, and that's quite right, and I think that's good. It's a nice little subsection of sort of Doctor Who sort of research, and I was going to say scholasticism, but I don't think that's a word. So let's before I appear resolutely unscholarly. Let's move on. So Lenny Henry here, famous comedian Sir Lenny Henry. I will also do a podcast on people from Doctor Who have been honoured by Her Majesty the Queen, or now His Majesty the King. There are the first person chronologically to appear in Doctor Who to have an honour is one that none of you will guess. A humble actor playing a humble part in a humble story, who I discovered quite by accident, was awarded an MBE. The first Sir to get credited on Doctor Who is Sir George Pollack, actually, who was a Sir at the time, who did the special photographic techniques that are used in the Daleks' master plan. He was a Sir at the time, but Sir Richard Rodney Bennett did the incidental music to the Aztecs, but he wasn't a Sir when when he did the Aztecs, obviously, but he became a Sir later on. So actually, that actor I referenced isn't the earliest honoured person, but no. So he's not. He's simply not. Is the earliest honoured person who isn't Sir Richard Rudley Bennett. There, let's do it like that. Oh no, yeah, because then there's, I think Verity Lambert probably had an OBE, did she? But anyway, let's not get into that. The reason I'm talking, I don't know actually. Yes, Verity Lambert. Yeah, Verity Lambert was. I'm sure. Yeah, Verity Lambert was an OBE. Anyway, let's not disappear down that rabbit hole. That is a podcast to have some other time. But yes, Lenny Henry. Lenny Henry I will always be very fond of, because scholarship. The word is scholarship. The word is scholarship, Toby. Sometimes the simplest solution is the easiest one. So this is all very nicely done. We'll talk about Lenny Henry, I'm sure. He's in this a lot. But here we have the two South African actors playing Australian and doing so very well. This is lovely atmospheric stuff. Yeah, again, the lighting in this whole story, I think, is excellent. And Jamie Magnus-Stone directs it really well. I think there's real atmosphere to this. And that car chase before that I talked over, I liked a lot too, because not only was it skillfully done, and those things we're used to seeing on a much bigger scale in movies. Like if that had been a Mission Impossible film, they'd have smashed a load of the cars, but it's obviously really expensive to smash things. And I don't mind when films do chases and things and don't smash things. I watched one of the later Die Hards recently, and it was grotesque, the amount of cars that they sort of deliberately destroyed, and that sort of largesse I find rather distasteful. I like big explosions and action scenes and all that, but sort of destruction because you can, that some audiences seem to have an appetite for, and certainly some filmmakers have an appetite for, I don't like at all. And so it's probably another reason I like Doctor Who, is that you can't be too destructive, you can't break things. And so therefore you can have that action and excitement in the way that you can have tension without using swear words, where you can allude to romantic things without having anything overtly sexual, where you can have violence without it being post-watershed. Those restrictions, I think, require the makers to be more ingenious, but also have a restraint, which means that things are suggested and suggestion on our imaginary forces work. So I like the fact that car chase was exciting and thrilling, but didn't have lots of smashing up of things, which always leaves me. I always do think, oh, don't do that. When they absolutely muller a load of perfectly functioning vehicles, or I'm sure they have ways of doing it with ones that have been stripped out or whatever. But it just seems, particularly sort of big bucks American movies, there seems to be a sort of a rather unpleasant appetite for sort of wanton and prolific destruction that I think they would be equally good films without. And that Die Hard one particularly, where I think it's not that he steps on these cars, I think he's in a big thing and he goes over car and car again and just absolutely destroys them. And I was going, oh, you don't need to do that. So yeah, these actors both get killed on location, but well done to them. Dominique Mayer, the female performer there, is currently, and or has recently been in a playing quite a good role in a series called Warrior on Max, and had a very good part in that. But she's a South African actress based in Cape Town, but has played Australian in Doctor Who, has played American in American productions, so good for her. And as I say, there'll be a nice little subsection of actors who are, actors based in South Africa who are used in this period of the show. And it's much like when I would watch The X-Files, which this story reminds me of a bit as well, with its Men in Black and its conspiracy theory and stuff, and its the mysteriousness. And I love those effective, the silhouettes that you can't see. This is again, I think a bright silhouette, in the night sky, and some people besieged in a sort of cottage is nuts and bolts Doctor Who, and I think it's done really effectively. But yes, I always used to be quite enjoying the X-Files, seeing which of the conspirators had been cast locally in Canada, and it's largely when they use the word about, because it's a slightly different vowel sound coming from Canadians than from Americans, and I'd always I mean, it's a terrible things that we take pride in, but I pride myself I was pretty good at spotting which actors were Canadian and which weren't. So it's the games that we play when we watch for more than just the entertainment, which I'm afraid I do. I've always got an eye on sort of what's going on behind or what the context is, which is a curse and a blessing. It's a bit of both. But I can never quite watch just for the story that they're trying to tell. But that's because I'm a Doctor Who fan. Although I know there are some Doctor Who fans who are just very much into the fiction and what unfolds on screen. I like this whole setup. I like the idea of O in the outback with his computers and all of that, which obviously we discover is subterfuge. And this is very effective. This is nicely directed, and I like the misdirect that O is a geek. And in fact, I'd been told by a friend of mine who said, "Oh, I've got a spoiler. Do you want it?" I said, I'm not really that bothered, because I hadn't been wild about the first season. So I said, you give me a spoiler. Whereas often I try and remain spoiler free with new Doctor Who, because I've dived so deep into old Doctor Who that it's nice to have something fresh and to not know every nut and bolt of it. But he'd been told, my friend, who is fairly unimpeachable source, he's got his ear to the ground, and had been told by somebody very, very close, whose ear is probably got full of mud from the ground, who said, "Oh yes, the Sacha Dhawan is going to be in the new series, and he's playing the Master." So I knew that was happening. But as I say, this misdirect where he's playing this sort of geeky fan-like character made me kind of forget that until the end reveal. Even though part of me did it. It's funny how we do that. Struan Roger is playing the voice of the aliens here. In fact, he's taking part in another Happy Times and Places that I'm doing, that I was going to do before this and now I'm going to do after it. He's an excellent voice actor. He is, of course, the face of Bo. I think he's a wonderful actor. He's from Manchester, actually, where I am now. I once walked past him in the West End of London on my way to interview Anthony Calf, who then had only been in Doctor Who: The Visitation, but has since been in Empress of Mars as well. But I remember thinking, under normal circumstances, I'm going to stop to say hello to the face of Bo. Although Struan Roger is an actor I've always liked well long before his association with Doctor Who, so I'm glad he now has an association with the show, and he's got a wonderful voice. I don't think you maintain a voice like that without having the odd fag. I remember a friend of mine at university, George, saying to me when I said, I should probably stop smoking. Smoking's not good for me. He said, "Oh yeah, but it's very good for your voice." And I think even then, my friends sort of said, "Oh, your voice will stand you in good stead when you're an actor." And I do get a certain amount of voice work, which is very nice, but I gave up smoking 10 years ago, and I don't think it's affected my work. So it's a bad excuse. But gravelly tones from fags and drink, Richard. I don't think Richard. Well, Richard Burton was fags and drinks and fags and drink and whales, and that's a combination and a half, isn't it? I don't know if Anton Lesser smokes. He's one of my favourite voices of all. I love Anton Lesser's voice, that always sounds like it's on the verge of breaking into all the melancholy truths of the universe. He's an actor that should have been in Doctor Who by now, Anton Lesser. Anyway, I think this is quite a nice use of the regulars, have them split up, and I like these two as sort of investigators. They sometimes, I think, forget that Yaz is in the police as well, and they made good use of that here. And I always rather liked her. I was quite pleased that when Graham and Ryan left, it was left as Yaz and the Doctor, because I felt she would be given more to do, because I think she's a decent actress, and actually it's quite interesting, isn't it, that you have two female leads of Doctor Who for a while. love Lenny Henry's scarf. So Lenny Henry, oh yeah, well that's quite a nice twist as well. That's, you think, oh, he's going, I know you're here. First you think, oh, is he talking about the bag? And then making us think he's talking about them. Oh no, he says, I know you're here. He says, where are you first, doesn't he? You think he's talking about the bag. Oh no, he is talking about them. No, he's not talking about them. He's talking about the aliens, which is a nice twist. But yes, Lenny Henry was responsible for a Doctor Who sketch that I really liked in his show. It's a bit rude about the show. I didn't like the bit where they say, where Perry says, oh, but Doctor Who, this is a children's programme. And I remember getting very cross about that. But it did have some nice jokes in it about how the fact that everybody likes saying, you mean the Daleks, in that dramatic way that we say things, which is a truth, and it's funny, and the lots of running up and down corridors, which is funny. It's also got Lee Corns from Kinder in it, and it's got a political joke in it as well, because the Cybermen are Thatchos, Margaret Thatcher, and Denos, and it's got the line about "you will be privatised." Don't you mean liquidated? It's the same thing. So I used to love that sketch, and I actually recorded it. Oh, it's also got Ivor Salter in it as a ticket collector. Ivor Salter from the Space Museum and the Mythmakers and Black Orchid. Now that's quite good. That reminds me a bit of the bit in the Time Monster where Joe gets gobbled up by Kronos and ends up in a sort of nether sphere. So the drama has mounted up here. That you think, well, how's Yaz going to get out of that? And she did this. I'm always a bit dubious when people end up in netherworlds. I'm never a massive fan of places that exist between now and now where strange things happen, because I think sometimes they can be an excuse for impenetrable metaphor scenes with good actors doing sort of surreally stuff that doesn't actually mean anything. But my alarm bells always slightly ring when you find somebody ends up in a world that isn't our own. But that doesn't happen here, so that's okay. But it's never my favourite place to be. Whenever Deep Space Nine suddenly went into a place that was all white, I was like, oh God, it's going to get all bloody religious now, isn't it? People are going to speak in proverbs, and I'm going to get annoyed because I find all that stuff a little bit po-faced. And sometimes, netherworlds can be an excuse for plot to go nowhere, or people to find out things that they'd never find out if it was a normal program with the normal rules of science applying. Anything that smacks a little bit of magic or fantasy, he says, as a watcher of Doctor Who. But that's purely taste, and I think that's a lovely visual, and it's a good dramatic beat, because what's happened to her? She's been cut off. There's a bit of jeopardy there, which we need, because we're sort of 2/3 into this hour-long episode. It's an hour-long episode. So yes, Lenny Henry, Sir Lenny Henry, but I've also worked with Lenny Henry. I can't believe I have no photographs of me and Lenny Henry, because he used to come and try out material at the 99 Club in Leicester Square, where I was a regular compere for about 10 years. I find it when I lived in London, and then when I was in Manchester, I would travel back when the trains actually weren't diabolical. But let's not get into that. What was it like in the old days? Things worked properly and were cheaper. I worked with Lenny Henry, and he did what no other comic has ever done when I've worked with him. Is he brought an auto cue and a writer with him, and he was trying out some sort of stuff he was going to be doing on television, but he had it all on an auto cue, which I have to say got mixed response from audiences, who I think a lot of them quite justifiably went, if you're going to be doing stuff at us, at least learn it. But he wouldn't have had to learn it for the telly gig he was doing, so why bother? And he did it more than once, so I got to work with him 2 or 3 times. And I was also at an awards ceremony at the BBC Audio Awards, where I was up for an award that I didn't win, so I didn't get to cross swords with him then. But I did meet Martin Jarvis, a very sweaty Martin Jarvis, and I sat behind the director of the Doppelgangers episode, Julian Simpson, as well. So didn't speak to him either. So I look back now and go, why didn't you take advantage of these things? And I really should have got a photo of me and Lenny Henry. But I'll tell you my Lenny Henry stories one day. They're not particularly exciting, but they're also not. They're not particularly exciting, but they're more observations from limited experience. But anyway, I wish I'd got a photo, especially now that he's been in Doctor Who. He wasn't Sir Lenny Henry either then when I met him, I don't think. But yeah, I worked with him a few times. That's a thing that my younger self would have taken less in his stride than I did. So here we have one of these bits where people sit down and talk to each other, which happens quite a lot in this era of Doctor Who. Actually, I don't know why I was so hard on Ryan. I just don't think he ever quite works as a character, but I think he sometimes gets accused of being wooden, and I think he can come across as that, but I'm not sure. I don't think it's the actor's fault. But I'm inclined to be sympathetic towards actors. But I can kind of see what he's trying to do. I think he's trying to play this sort of straightforward, solid guy. But it does mean it's a bit one note. And as I say, I find the way that they brandish cancer and dyspraxia and sort of buzzwords that are shorthands for things that would be better dealt with by proper characterization a little bit. I think that's a big problem with Chris Chibnall's writing for me. I do like this misdirect of Sacha Dhawan basically playing a Doctor Who fan, and he does it very, very nicely. I mean, he's not obvious casting for a geek, I don't think, and that's why it's rather fun, because we're used to seeing him as sort of leading men, and either he's suave and or villainous, but so I'd never really seen him be geeky. So I thought that was quite nice casting, and again, sort of momentarily forgot. Made iced tea, but yeah. So that's just a throwaway bit that I've possibly made iced tea, and the Doctor should maybe be. I think it's fine for the Doctor to be rubbish at normal things like making iced tea, and I thought Stephen Moffat was very clever in the way that he made Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi seem very alien because they didn't know things that were obvious to us, like how when it says to Courtney you're 33, or the Doctor thought the wine would be more like the gums. But I think you need behind that, there always needs to be the ballast of the Doctor being the cleverest person in the room and being somebody who exudes wisdom, an eccentric wisdom, a vast intelligence and gravitas, albeit one compromised by quirkiness and maybe. There are occasions where the Doctor's hubris comes to bite the Doctor and all of that. So the Doctor is by no means perfect, but I think any of those imperfections that must come in to undermine the character, so they're not just gratingly, again, the best captain in the fleet or all of that. You want the Doctor to be quirky and flawed, but that needs to be ballasted at all times by, one, the Doctor being the most interesting person in the room, and two, the Doctor being the most intelligent person in the room. And I don't always feel that with this era. I think it's something to do with the writing. I think it's something to do with the characterization. But that's an area where I struggle with this era. Again, I'm just bringing this front and center because I'm trying to couch, some of the dissatisfaction I felt when these episodes were going out, but and give context. But I have to say, I thought the whole. The early on X-Files conspiracy stuff, the Mission Impossible-y spy stuff, and watching it, I was thinking, but I thought I'd liked the James Bond vibe of this, and I hadn't at this point really got quite so much of the James Bond film, and I'd wondered if I misremembered that, but actually later in the episode we get very James Bondy, including the music. But this is quite fun, all this working stuff out, and the picture of the fish, I think, is all fun. And this is the Doctor working things up working things out in a clever way, that's fun and quirky and Doctor Who like. And at the moment, as I say, no idea that I don't think there's any clue that O is dodgy. And I think that's a nice misdirect. And you feel like O is going to be, the guest helper of the week, and that the big bad is Lenny Henry. And why not? Why would you not have Lenny Henry as your main threat? And he's still an important presence, but and so here we have where Spyfall, the title comes. It's not just those spies disappearing in the beginning that leads us into the story. The spies who fell to earth, haha. And this is all really nice, good. I wonder if I'm going to have the lighting. I don't know how often I choose the lighting, but I think the lighting and the direction of this episode have been very good. I'm now struggling. There's quite a long scene of people talking, and I've been talking over as well, which is. But hang on, how far have I got into a story I don't really know? 46 minutes out of 59. I've done all right. Oh, bless him. He's very sweet. He's. And that looks all right. The shut up. That's quite. And again, I don't mind sort of my modern. It's the balance, isn't it, of Doctor Who? Because sometimes you don't expect people to say, "Oh, shut up," when they see something spectacular in Doctor Who. You expect people to say, "Upon my soul," or whatever, because a lot of Doctor Who has taken place in the past, or it has that Victorian adventurer thing. But the worst fan fiction has everybody in it talking, as the Doctor saying, indubitably. So I don't mind some of the modern colloquialisms in Doctor Who as much as I thought I might, although I'd like less of it from the Doctor, I have to say, because the Doctor should be kind of timeless. That's a very James Bondy refrain in the music, and I like that. James Bond is an estimable franchise, is also one that I think, like Doctor Who, will be interesting to view historically in the context of the modern times. I love that. The name's the Doctor. And look, we didn't see the actress playing the person who's got the guest list because that's an extra, and her line was added in ADR. It means you don't have to pay somebody quite so much. It's one of those several ways that television has now saved a few quid on actors, because the actors there are far too many actors earning a living, and it's much better if it's a real struggle, and even opportunities to earn a few quid playing an unrewarding part have been diluted. But I like this Bondian vibe. I think there's nothing wrong with one national institution aping another, a national institution that itself has to reinvent itself. And I had a big row with my partner, not a big row, but I had a little bit of a back and forth with my partner, Shez, about whether there should be a female James Bond or not. My feeling is you don't have to get equity by changing things that used to be men into women, but that's not necessarily the answer. I think that's again kind of performative and kind of snarky. It's a kind of like, no, it's not enough to get parity. We have to take this thing from that, and anybody that doesn't like it, we can say is a baddie. And I think that's all those sorts of arguments are reductive and unhelpful. I personally not fussed either way about whether Doctor Who is female or not, and I think it's I think there are so many interesting female actors who could play Doctor Who, but I sometimes, the way that it is couched, like that it's a victory over you guys, I don't think it needs to be like that. And also I'm very conscious as well of seeing as we have to talk these days about representation and all of those sorts of things, and we're cognizant of them, and rightly so. Let's remember that everybody needs to feel represented, and so to take a representation for if it is that, well, a character on television has to be like us for us to feel represented by them, which I would say is not actually necessarily true. And the whole point of the Doctor is that the Doctor is enigmatic, so things like gender and colour and all of that don't actually matter. it's more to do with the nature of the character. I didn't identify with Doctor Who because Doctor Who was a middle-aged white guy, because I wasn't a middle-aged white guy when I was a kid, but because Doctor Who was clever and an outsider, and was Doctor Who wasn't somebody I thought I could be. It was somebody I saw as somebody to aspire to be like, and not because they look like me. So I think it's much more complex than that, but I think a lot of modern day arguments are quite reductive and often waged in a rather simplistic and fatuous manner. But why was I saying that? But I also think it's very interesting culturally to look at what has happened in the past decade or so with modern cultural icons or timeless cultural icons, and how they've tried to adapt themselves to early 21st century Britain. And I think that is very interesting, because popular culture reflects its times, and these will be, when we look back on these in 20 years, we will see things in them that we perhaps might not realise now as well. So it's not just the obvious that we'll look back on and go, yeah, well, this was a particular concern of the 21st century, and this was a phase they went through, or this was on the way to doing this and this becoming the norm. We don't know, because we don't know how the world's going to turn out. But I find that fascinating, because I find Doctor Who endlessly fascinating and studyable, and I do that without rancor. I do see, but I also see people who I think have reservations about some of the directions Doctor Who has moved in, and I think some of the points they make I can understand, and I also see some people making similar points who I think are absolute arseholes who are making the point in a really bad way. I hope I am neither of those things. I actually sort of don't know what I think. I think it's really hard for me to, but I know I'm never in a massive hurry to watch the stories of this era, and it's not because I don't want a female Doctor Who. It is because I think I struggle with some of what I think the rather simplistic and unartful writing, and because I think there are sort of casting issues and chemistry issues and just practical issues of having sort of the four characters in the 50-minute to an hour time slot. I think is quite a difficult juggle. Although again, I think it's quite reasonably managed here. And actually, I think this episode is pretty well done. I think it just about sustains its hour, and I think there are twists and turns. But as I say, I particularly like the aping of the James Bond stuff. I'm not a massive James Bond fan. I have friends who are huge Bondians, and I can certainly appreciate what James Bond is. And I think that's another interesting aspect of our times, is that we've realised, I was desperate for Doctor Who to be taken seriously in the 80s and to be given its due as an important cultural force. I think it has that now, and I think Bond does too, that we've realised that popular entertainment is perhaps more important because of its disposability than high art, in a way, because popular entertainment affects and connects with more people. And I think, now we have media studies courses where you can study Doctor Who. Well, I would like to sort of think I'm self-taught, and that actually schools and colleges maybe don't need to spend their time teaching people about stuff that they're predisposed to like anyway. I don't think schools should, I don't need schools teaching my kids to enjoy watching television, because I'll enjoy watching television with them. I think schools should be encouraging kids to enjoy things that are maybe harder to get into, and to engage them about literature and art and things that are perhaps not so accessible. I think, but I come from a time when there was a need actually for media and film and everything to be taken more seriously than it was. And maybe now I sort of think that we've gone too far. And in the same way that in saying, well, we should take this stuff seriously because television is like the national theatre; it's the national talking point, etc., etc., etc. As Dennis Potter always thought it was, the most important medium because it was the one that everybody watched. It was in everybody's homes. But then the minute you start taking Doctor Who too seriously, and you only have to look at modern discourse carried out by various quarters on not just Doctor Who, but on lots of subjects, but of things like comedy, my business, where there are serious elements to comedy, but you can't take it too seriously. And if you do take it too seriously, you suck all the joy out of it. Somebody posted a thing on their Facebook the other day showing somebody whose name they blacked out on Twitter, saying something like, if you're writing a character that has bad qualities in them, you need to address those bad qualities in your script. Otherwise, it seems like you're justifying them and exhibiting them yourself. It's like, no, you let the audience realise that. You don't have to have a character come and point out or give that person a comeuppance, because then it's not drama, it's not a story, it's an outlying of, it's a template for finger wagging. It's obvious, and I find this is very much an element of the modern day, is that we have to distance ourselves from everything awful, which as creative people know sometimes you have to talk about and address and sometimes show that you understand the motivations of the awful. I can understand the motivations of awful people without sympathising with them or justifying them, but I'm also not going to deny that they exist. It's bizarre. I think I got slightly lost around the houses there, but it's because I think in redressing the balance that Doctor Who and popular culture was not taken seriously, I think there's now often examples of us taking it far too seriously, and the minute that Doctor Who disappears up its own fundament, it's kind of lost. It always has to have that sort of escapist, joyous craziness about it, which this stuff has in spades. I think Sacha Dhawan is very good as the Master, but I think it's interesting, isn't it, on Behind the Sofa when he watches how Roger Delgado does it and goes, oh, he's on the Behind the Sofa on one of the DVDs and goes, oh, I hadn't thought of, he's so urbane and so under the radar. And it's because he's come directly after Michelle Gomez, who I think is brilliant, but she has she's shown the madness behind the Master, which was much more contained within Roger Delgado. Anthony Ainley is a bit more gleeful about it, but he doesn't quite have that sort of damaged insanity, the brilliance of Michelle Gomez, who I think is excellent. So, and I think that's what he's taken as the key here, is that the Master is a bit mad and a bit crazy, and he does all of that very well, but I think that's only taking one element of the character, and I'm glad that we get to see him come back, because I do think he's very, very good. But you can see that it's the next step from Gomez, rather than necessarily going back to the fundamentals of the character, if you like. Everything you know is a lie, so we're setting there up the Timeless Children, which we can talk about another time. But this is all really dramatic. This is all exciting stuff. A plummeting plane, the reveal of the Master. It's interesting hearing Master said 3 or 4 times and everybody pronounces it Master. That shows that television has changed from everybody speaking RP, and because you'd always say it's the Master. Nobody I mean, we heard it in Eric Roberts' accent, but never heard so many northern people say Master before, and so that's an interesting development, of sign of television allowing more texture and representation, and rightly so. That's very interesting. So that's the so there we are. Well, look, I got distracted twice then, and I don't think I either time expressed myself in the way that I would like to have done, but I guess I'll have to live with that. Headline news is, I think when we become progressive in terms of representation and perhaps changing, dedicated to the memory of the masterful Terence Dicks. I love that. Oh, that's brought a tear to my eye. I love that. I love Terence Dicks, and I love that they did that. And we have the trail for for the next episode. So yeah, the headline news, and I didn't even get to my feelings about them bringing the Master back so quickly, but I did talk about that, I think, when I talked about the Master's last appearance, which I did not that long ago in Happy Times and Places. And I've also got the next episode where I'm imagining at the moment me getting lost for things to say all the time, because that's what I worry about with all these new episodes of Doctor Who. But yeah, I'll just go back to the 2 points that I made, I think, quite badly. When we're, I think, when we're trying to make things more progressive, I think we need to be wary that we're not doing it in a way that seems vengeful, or in a way that exhibits the same zeal or aptitude or even laziness of prejudice about people's immutable characteristics, that we're not guilty of doing the same sin but in a different direction, in that we can call for more representation of various different groups without thinking that the group who has perhaps been overrepresented at times, that individuals within that group don't have their own feelings of inadequacy and victimhood and difficulties, because we don't. One doesn't feel part of a group, even maybe subconsciously, but consciously as an individual, one doesn't feel insulated from the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune just because one belongs to a particular group. And if you see a group of people doing what you think of as well, you may not be aware of the battles being fought within that individual's head, in just the same way that I'm not glib about seeing somebody rich crying, because I go, what you got to cry about? You're rich. Well, just because somebody's rich, it doesn't mean that they aren't prey to the same sort of psychological insecurities that we have for other things. So I always think, I think in when we're trying to make trying to level the playing field these days, particularly in popular culture, I think we must do it without being snarky or unkind, even to when we're doing it to people that we think probably have a nice life, because you don't know, and just don't do it anyway. Don't do it to anybody. We all think we've got we all think the people that we're mean to can take it, otherwise we wouldn't be mean to them. But I think just try not to be mean if you can. So that's what I was talking about when I was talking about changing male characters to female characters. I don't. As I say, I'm not that well. I just don't think James Bond would work as a female character, because that's not what James Bond is. And I think it's all right for men like my friend Matt, who quite likes, who's a big hulking bald guy who likes the smooth, sophisticated, sexist, jokey James Bond character, because he's fictional, to do all those things that are sort of guilty pleasures. And that's what fiction is about. Doesn't mean you'd endorse that behaviour in real life, but that's what escapism is. So it's all right that you can have that sort of terrible role model, because that kind of gets some of that stuff out, and mean you're not like that in real life. And I think it's nice, it's okay to have an escapist character to not even be an ideal. That's part of the fun of it. It's not a manifesto for how to behave in real life. It's popular escapist entertainment. So that's what, and I think part of James Bond's success is because, he appeals to I know there are female James Bond fans, but there's an element that appeals to the sort of boyishness in people, and that's okay. That's allowed. That doesn't mean that you can't have other role models for other people in different shows as well, but you don't have to change the one that is like it is, and that is successful for being like it is. Doctor Who, I think, is a different case, because Doctor Who is a shape-changing alien, and Doctor Who thrives on change. So I'm not saying I resist the female Doctor Who, although I do think there are things about the way that this Doctor is characterised that I think are wanting. And the second thing was when I got to the end, when I was talking about, I was just trying to make the point about how, and again, I'm aware that I probably disappeared down too many internet arseholes. So I'm disappeared down too many internet arseholes. I meant to say rabbit holes, and arseholes came out. Well, there we go. I think Dr. Freud will have something to say about that. I'm gonna wipe my search history now, lest you think I've got lots of internet arseholes that I've disappeared down. But internet rabbit holes where I'm very conscious that there are awful things, awfully sexist and racist things being said in reaction to modern Doctor Who. But that shouldn't be used as an excuse to stop people from discussing shortcomings that modern Doctor Who might have that are nothing to do with the sexistness or the racistness of the correspondence, because I know people who are neither, who've struggled with the latest manifestations of Doctor Who. But that also might be partially because they're getting older, and old people don't like new things. And I'm aware that I'm now a 50-year-old man who might, and I'm not talking about Doctor Who now, but there's all sorts of things about modern life that I am slightly askance at, but that's the sort of natural order of things, and it's a constant conversation I have with myself about am I reacting to that because it's genuinely bad, or is genuinely a worrying move in society because this happens or that happens, or is it just because I'm a bit of an old fuddy-duddy and I'm designed to be like that because I'm used to things being one way and they're not that way now, and that's because I'm getting older and because the world is being created for people who are coming up behind me because they're making it comfortable for them because they're going to live in it longer than I am because I'll die first. And that then in itself goes, but hang on, I'll die first. That's a terrifying thing. I'm scared. And what do we do if we're scared? We double down. We get defensive, and that's why all of these things happen. But equally, there are some things that happen in modern life, like people, listening to their music without headphones on public transport, or even with headphones that actually just make the music leak, or people dropping litter, or people being noisy, or those cars that have the noisy exhausts, all those sorts of things. I don't think that's because I'm getting old. I think that's because all those people are scumbags who should be killed. And so equally, I might think there's problems with the writing and acting and characterization in certain manifestations of Doctor Who in the past 10 years that I can that I need to sort of talk about out loud and work out whether that's because I'm a Doctor Who fan who's always finding fault in Doctor Who until it's old and safe, and then I love it and I'm nostalgic about it, or is it because I have a genuine point, and that's what some of this is about. But also a reminder that the whole point of these podcasts is that I try to be positive because there's so much negativity out there, and that's not because I'm sucking up to anybody. It's not because I'm a shill. I'll tell you what I genuinely think, and sometimes I'll change my mind about what I think mid-sentence, as we've probably discovered. But I have no agenda apart from to provide you with something entertaining, either that you agree with what I'm saying and find some comfort or companionship in that, or because you disagree with what I'm saying and it makes you go, no, because my opinion is this and it's right, and it helps you to firm down your own opinions, go, no, he's wrong when he says that, and that's fine too, because as I say, I might think completely different things tomorrow. But I think we should be able to talk about this stuff without the assumption that it's anything other than formulating thoughts. There's no agendas, there's no subconscious fascism or anything like that. It's just a genuine reaction, and I genuinely, as I say, I genuinely try to be positive because there's so much negativity out there in the world. I don't want to be putting any out. It's only a silly Doctor Who podcast, this, but I do think it's important to. Yeah, and also respect all the hard work that goes into it. I know how difficult it is to make television programmes, full stop, and Doctor Who is a television programme of great ambition, and everybody, I don't think anybody lazy works on those shows, and just making something coherent is hard enough, let alone something that's an exciting adventure in space and time that's works on a BBC budget. And there's a lot of ingenuity there in Spyfall. But yeah, I was just couching that because I have to be honest that this is an era that I am at the moment, is not my go-to era of Doctor Who, and one that I haven't quite totally come to terms with yet. So, and as I say, there are a couple of things there that, in the heat of the commentary battle, I don't think I expressed particularly well. So anyway, I hope that's all right. Oh, it's just a man talking. It doesn't, that's all it is. And it's this man, so it's a pretty harmless one. But no. But I think it's going to be fairly easy to come up. So what do we have to do is, because it's a modern two-parter, if it, in a classic Who, we do one positive thing per episode and then a bonus thing. With a modern 45-50 minute episode of Doctor Who, we do 5 things. But because this is a two-parter, we do 3 things per episode. Do we then do a bonus? I can't remember. I can't remember the rules of my own podcast. I'm sure I'll discover that next time. But for now, I'm pretty sure I only have to come up with 3 for the lovely Joe, who is a lovely, lovely chap, and another. He's just putting positive vibes out there, and is a really good guy. And I sometimes we just send WhatsApp messages to each other if I want an injection of positivity, or somebody to say, I like this, I didn't like that, or whatever. Did you see this? Did you see that? Good lad, Joe. And that's the lovely thing about Doctor Who as well, the sort of community that it can have. But I have to say, I have recently I even sort of put it on to go to sleep. So I have disappeared down a few rabbit holes of slightly, shall we say, less positive commentators, and it's a good way of infecting your brain, and I'm not sure it's healthy, but we're always more drawn to drama, and to, you always read the 1-star reviews more than any other. I don't know what it's interesting, isn't it? We're always drawn to disaster. So anyway, my favourite 3 things about Spyfall Part 1. Well, definitely, this is an obvious and easy one. It's the dedication to Terrance Dicks at the end of the episode. I think that's a beautiful thing that they've done, and I like the fact that they make a habit of doing that in modern Who and modern television, because a lot of modern television does take its eye off the ball on that, and I get very cross when the BAFTAs and places miss people out who've made important contributions to British television. And back in but that's not a modern phenomenon. That fine actor Duncan Lamont's death was not reported even in the stage. It was reported in his local newspaper, none of the nationals, and he died making an episode of Blake 7 in the lead up to Christmas. Robert Holmes died before his last episode of Doctor Who was transmitted, not a mention on the credits at all, or even in a voiceover or anything. So it's not just that things are bad in the modern era. I think these things have always depended on the people doing them. So credit to the Doctor Who production teams, Matt Strivens and Chris Chibnall and whoever else made those decisions, to give a credit to the masterful, and how appropriate as well that it had the return of the master. But either way, the fact that Terrance Dicks got that dedication was appropriate, was appreciated, and was I think a really nice thing to have done, especially in this day and age as well, where credits fly past and we're not supposed to really pay attention to anybody or anything. So definitely that, and that's not because I can't find good things to find about the episode, because I can find plenty. I love Segun Akinola's score, which I think is just the right side of parodic and does the sort of that atmosphere well, but also the thrilling excitement well. I like the characterization of O as this sort of geek. I thought that was fun. They had fun with that, and the O joke. I like all the sort of pre-credits spies getting taken away stuff. I thought it's pretty well paced. But my number 2 thing that is actually of the episode is and the title alludes to it. I like the Doctor Who James Bond interface. It may be partially because I've come off Mission Impossible, but I think it was our Mission Impossible marathon. But I think it was my favourite thing about the episode when it first went out. I really enjoyed the fact that they'd gone to town a bit, really, with the whole James Bond thing. I like, but without it being, there weren't too many jokes would have taken it too far. I like, my name's Doctor the Doctor. That's a really funny joke. But I think they judge it just right, and it's nice to see, a one piece of popular culture melding with another. I thought that was rather fun, and is well done. Is judged properly, and it's well made. The director does a good job with it. The director stages the car chases and does the the vibe, and all of the production design contributes to that as well. Everyone in their tuxes and bow ties and the casino stuff, and the whole James Bond thing is done very, very, very well. And my third thing, the lighting and the photography is really nice. I think Jamie Magnus Stone directs it very well. I think Sacha Dhawan is very good. It's nice having Stephen Fry in Doctor Who. It's fun having Lenny Henry in Doctor Who. I like the location filming. I like the Men in Black and all of that business. There are some good lines in it too. I think the name's Doctor, the Doctor. I do think that's a funny joke. I think I'm going to go with the lighting because I think there's a lovely contrast between the beautiful photography of those excellent South Africa exteriors, which I think is a really canny production move, the way that they've used that location and had it to stand in for different countries, and it's really opened up the scope of the show, and that's exactly what you want for a James Bondy sort of thrillery, Mission Impossible-y type thing. But I think the lighting in some of the interior scenes, therefore, is spooky and X-Files-y and shadowy. But then the way that they've lit the TARDIS, I think they've made that look phenomenal. It's and actually even that opening scene with the American guy in Moscow, the place that he goes into is it's got the light streaming in, and I think the lighting in the different scenes helps because it's an hour-long episode as well. It really helps to give it the spookiness where it needs to, the conspiracy theory stuff where it needs to. Makes that TARDIS set, which I don't think always looks great, look really, really good. But then you have the contrast with the outside, and then the netherworld with its greens. I think I'm going to go with the lighting. There were other things when I was watching it. I picked 4 or 5 or 6 things, which all abandoned me this time around. But that's part of the problem with watching a thing and talking all the way through it. I think there are a few lines that I really, really liked that I've forgotten now. So if you've got a favourite line in this that I didn't choose, I loved it the first time around and talked to it during this. I do like the O joke a lot. I thought that was quite fun. But yeah, so Terrance Dicks, the James Bondy spoofy vibe element to it, and the lighting. Let's see what Joe has chosen. I suspect he won't have chosen. I mean, he's going to choose something really, really obvious now. Oh, I did like the Doctor being on the under the TARDIS, repairing it like she was doing a car as well. I thought that was quite fun. So let's see what Joe says about because that's the thing. That's because sometimes people say, I like it when you're honest about the stuff that you did. The bit where the Doctor's playing Snap. Now, if the Doctor is there to undermine the pomposity of a situation, the Doctor can get something like that wrong. If the Doctor is an alien in a situation where everybody's being human, that is quite fun, that the humans all expect this and the Doctor does something alien from left field. Or if the Doctor is acting the fool in order to distract the baddies or to make them undermine her, that is a legitimate use of the Doctor getting the wrong end of the stick. That the Doctor, like Patrick Troughton is in The Dominators, people, and Tom Baker is, frequently, nobody can be as stupid as he seems, where apparent foolishness is a weapon to make. It's the Columbo thing, isn't it? You will underestimate me if I behave in a certain way. But in that situation, the Doctor is basically drawing attention to herself by being stupid. Now, I know it's a joke, but to me it serves no. It doesn't. The Doctor as a character is not succeeding in that scene because of any of the things that those things that the Doctor does would normally help with. The Doctor not knowing how to play cards does not help the Doctor in that scene. It also doesn't make anyone misjudge the Doctor in that scene that the Doctor can turn to her advantage. It's also not helping the Doctor to remain undiscovered and unnoticed. Now, sometimes the Doctor draws attention to themselves in order to distract, but that's not what she's doing there either. So, and I know it's only a joke, but to me, you can have jokes like that in Doctor Who where they serve a purpose to enhance the character or show that the character has one up on everybody else, or to show that the character is an alien. And the Doctor can sometimes get the wrong end of the stick. The Doctor isn't always right, but that's not what that was showing. That wasn't showing the Doctor's arrogantly or alienly misunderstood something, and that will then have a consequence for the drama. That was just sort of going, this Doctor's a bit of an idiot. And the Doctor can be a bit of an idiot sometimes, but it always needs to be backed up by, but the Doctor's being a bit of an idiot because the Doctor is the wisest, oldest, smartest person in the room. And I don't always get that impression with the way that this Doctor conducts herself or is written. So, that's just an example of again, why. And because a few people have said, look, it's all right to, when you're accentuating the positive, it's all right to say what some of the things are, and I think I need to work out what it is that I struggle with, and that was just one example when I was watching the first time round that made me go, so why is it that I'm not into that? And I think that that's a bit of a misunderstanding of how the Doctor works. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, Bond, aping of Bond, the lighting. I'd love to say the ability to spot South African actors in their natural environment, and the dedication to Terence Dicks. They're my three favourite things about Spyfall Part 1. What a Joes.
So my first thing that I've chosen is having the audacity of killing off Stephen Fry, who I think gives a masterful performance. And I love the fact that the Doctor is brought in by MI5, MI6. The Doctor's brought in by the government, essentially. It feels pure Bondian. It feels very Doctor Who, because it feels like we're tying into sort of Pertwee times as well. And I know Chibnall has a massive hard-on for Pertwee era. And Stephen Fry comes in, and we know how this works. He's like a big named guest star. He's going to have a fantastic role throughout this story. He delivers a ton of exposition with style and ease. He chows down on Chris Chibnall dialogue effortlessly, and then he's shot in the back and falls flat dead on this. And at that point, I was like, "Oh my word, anything could happen in this story now." I genuinely thought he was going to be the lead guest star. Like, I don't know where this is going now, but I am on board for the ride. Some people would say it was a waste of Stephen Fry, but I love the fact it kind of ties into that sort of Janet Leigh thing in Psycho, where the expectation is that the actor is going to have a big role, and then the twist that they're written out so suddenly and shockingly means that anything goes at this point. Marvelous.
Yep, can't argue with that, and beautifully put. And of course, Joe, I think you're the first person in Happy Times and Places history, and so how appropriate in your very first monologue of affirmation to use the phrases hard on and chow down. But yes, I agree with that, and to say it's a waste of an actor is as Joe says is a misapprehension, partially because sometimes an actor of that caliber might only be available for a couple of days, and you go, well, that's all right, come and do. And there is such a thing, history of film and theatre, and film, theatre, and television is littered with people who come on and just do a bit, and then bugger off. In David Tennant's Hamlet, the player king was played by John Woodvine. He didn't hang around for the curtain call. He came and did that bit, and off he went. And yes, you have cameos from big actors. If you can get a big actor to do that part, well, one, it sends out a signal, because you do expect them to be around for the duration. So then that makes that sudden death shocking. And, having had the Doctor allied to the very top of, MI5 or whatever it is, you then take away that comfort blanket, that safety blanket, and you think it's going to be one story where the Doctor is helping the government, and actually it's one story where, not even the government is safe. So that means the Doctor has to do what the Doctor does best, which is kind of, assemble the motley crew and go and do it that way. And all of that really works, and it seemed quite overdue that Stephen Fry should be in Doctor Who. And then, of course, it's rather unceremoniously shocking when he's removed from proceedings very quickly. So yes, that is a good choice, and I couldn't agree more. Except I could agree more by agreeing so much that I chose it for my thing, but I didn't. See what I did there? See what I did there? Oh.
My second thing is that I think this genuinely is the best ever Master reveal. I was completely fooled. I jumped out of my seat when Sacha Dhawan was revealed to be the Master and punched the air and went, yes! I was so delighted to be tricked. And this ties into Chibnall's kind of lack of marketing, because in any other era, I think this might have been blown. And if Chibnall ever needed to justify that, then my personal reaction to the Master reveal in this is all the justification he needs, because it is one of my favorite moments of watching on broadcast Doctor Who episode, even more than Utopia, because I had a suspicion with Utopia. And Sacha Dhawan gives such an incredible performance as O before he's revealed. He's so likable, and you desperately want him to go to the TARDIS and go on this ride with the Doctor. And when that knife is pulled out and twisted into the Doctor, it's such a great scene. Everything about it. The dialogue is great. I love the setting on the plane, everybody's reaction, and Sacha Dhawan's kind of demonic, psychotic performance as the Master. Suddenly, it's just delightful.
Yeah, that's true. And in fact, I probably got slightly distracted from one that I was talking about cultural things over the Master reveal, that I didn't talk about that. But that's partially because, and we'll go into my feelings about the Master returning so quickly when we're in episode 2, I'm sure. But also the fact that he's revealed to be the Master distracted me from what is actually probably, I think, the best thing about the whole episode is Sacha Dhawan as O, which is a lovely, lovely performance. He's a very good actor. And as I say, it was an interesting, an untypecasting kind of performance that, as I say, distracted me from what I knew. Unlike Joe, I'd been told that Sacha Dhawan was going to be playing the Master. I'd then forgotten that, and as I say, I'm sure he wasn't billed as being in the episode, or I'd forgotten anyway. The big news was Lenny Henry and Stephen Fry, and then he pops up. But as I say, my brain kind of went, okay, he's this geeky operative guy, and he's going to be this fun sidekick. And then you have that Master reveal, which is effectively done. As I say, I think the Psycho Master thing coming so soon after the unhinged, damaged Master of Michelle Gomez, is perhaps too close a bedfellow to me, that as I say, it makes me think, well, do they just think the Master's this one thing now, this sort of mad jokery thing where, and as we know, when Sacha Dhawan saw Roger Delgado on Behind the Sofa, and went back to the original, you might say there's actually it was devised as a much more subtle menace. And Michelle Gomez is an actress of great daring who brings that, I will bring everything to it. That's a particular quality she has. But Sacha Dhawan actually isn't that kind of actor, and that's not to say he doesn't do the madness well, but having that front and centre straight away, as I say, seems perhaps too closely related, and that as I say ties in slightly with the fact that I thought it was an unnecessarily, an unimaginatively quick return for the character as well, which, having previously gone, we're not bringing any old things back, when let's bring that old thing back that actually had a really nice ending that Moffat gave Sim and Gomez, that could perhaps be allowed to breathe. It did seem a bit like opening champagne at the funeral, and I thought, I thought slightly not reading the room, which is again another kind of issue I have with the Chibnall era, which we'll probably get into next episode as well, where there does seem to me to be a bit of going, oh well, they did that, so all I have to do is do the same, and then he does something that one of his predecessors done and does it less well. Oh dear, here's me trying to be positive. But the positive out of that is that Sacha Dhawan actually does very well, and I think is a really good Joker-esque master for the modern day, and it is a very good reveal, and I would have probably chosen Sacha Dhawan's performance as as the highlight of the episode had circumstances of this commentary not distracted me from the things I should have been doing. So that's my fault. I'm not going to win this one. Hey, look, I've just won the censor rights. I can kind of have a bit of time off victory.
My third thing is, and this might feel like a bit of a cheat, but it's actually the cliffhanger, which comes immediately after the master reveal. But I love the fact that I think series 11 was a bit sedate and thoughtful. I don't think there was a lot of excitement in series 11, and Chibnall immediately is trying to redress that in Spyfall. I think actually series 12 is a little bit too energetic in parts and could do with looking over his shoulder at series 11. There's a happy medium between the two somewhere. I don't think series 11 gets it quite right. I don't think series 12 gets it quite right. But to have this kind of very dynamic, very exciting, very explosive cliffhanger executed with such panache. I love the Doctor's reaction when she finds the bomb. To see Jodie panicking when she realizes that she can't defuse it. And then when she's stolen away by the, oh God, what are they called? The Vor. And the Doctor whispers to her, everything you thought you know is a lie. We're like, what the hell does that mean? I mean, that ain't going to turn out to be a disappointment or rewriting Doctor Who history, is it? The Master literally he's like an agent of chaos. The plane's exploding around him. He's absolutely loving it. And you've got Graham, Ryan, and Yaz clinging on for dear life as that plane is going down. And I really like those three characters. So I was genuinely invested in how they were going to survive. It was one of those moments that was so perfectly executed. And it came straight after the Master reveal. I was like, take a breath, Joe. Take a breath. But I just thought to myself, this is like fantastically exciting television. And anyone that says that Chibnall can't produce exciting television, absolute nonsense. It's there right in front of you. So those are my three things for Spyfall.
Yeah, well put. I think I'd have preferred the episode ending to have finished on the plane and not in the forest of portentousness, but I've explained my predisposition dislike Dreamworld, so that's entirely me. And I just think the action is more effective to end with a plummeting plane than with a woman standing, I was going to say gormlessly, amongst a load of trees. But look, there we are. I've been building up to this. Has been on my list to do for about the past 6 months, and I finally decided to bite the bullet and do it. So please bear with me as I still do try to find the positive, but I'm not going to lie to you. And as I say, these are my opinions right now, which will change, and perhaps exposure to Joe, who I know is a great fan of this era, will change me. I don't hang any import on my opinions. It's not the Bible. I'm not trying to convert anybody to my way of thinking, and I would rather get to the point where I can see so much in these sort of stories that I can fire them up as readily as I would fire up Revelation of the Daleks or The Web of Fear or Terror of the Zygons or any of my other sort of go-to Doctor Who stories, Gridlock, Parting of the Ways, whatever. So, I'm not one that, as I say, I've watched a lot of, I've seen a few, I've been upbraided by a few people going, oh, you should be a bit more critical, and I've looked on their comments where they just spend their whole time being really cross and angry with everything. I think, well, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be a cross and angry person. Doctor Who is supposed to take me to my happy place, and I like to, where I can. I don't do much. I don't have much as a person. I can't give much, but I would like to give entertainment and joy if I can, and I don't see joy being imparted by snarkiness or criticism, or engaging criticism that can be fun, but engaging in slagging off the show seems to me contrary to what I would like to be putting out there, and that's just me. And so but nonetheless, a few kind contributors have said, yeah, but it's okay, we know you're trying to be positive, so don't hide if you don't like something, because that can be interesting too. Hopefully you've taken that for what it is. And I have to say, I did enjoy watching it this afternoon. I was pleasantly surprised. I still did have a handful of reservations here and there, but I thought that was a good episode of Doctor Who. It's a great season opener. I thought it was exciting. I thought it was fun. I thought it was very well made, very well directed, and had some really good moments. And I certainly thought a lot of the misdirection, with Lenny Henry in his office when we thought he'd found Yaz and Ryan, and with the Master particularly, and the way, and with what happened to Stephen Fry and stuff. I think it was all actually very cleverly conceived and put together. So yeah, I enjoyed that. Next week I know is a very different kettle of fish, and let's see if I like my herring flavoured tea. But for now, I hope that was okay. Look, it's just a man talking about Doctor Who. It's not very important, but I hope it's at least been interesting. Thanks very much for listening. Thanks to Joe. Please do listen to A Hamster with a Blunt Penknife. It's a wonderful way to spend your time, and he has really good guests, and I like checking in with him and his chums. And yes, and his commentaries, of course, have the advantage that it's not a stuttering monologue from somebody who qualifies things, requalifies them, then explains them, then doesn't explain them very well, and then gets distracted, and then has to go back and apologise lest he scores defence, but then all of those things that you've heard me do and I'm now explaining. Anyway, hurrah! I'm going to go and make myself a cup of tea, but there will be no fish in my kettle, and I will hope that you will join me for Spyfall Part 2 in the next edition of Happy Times and Places. Yes, Spyfall, or, of course, that's what it's called in America. In Great Britain, it's called Spy Autumn. Thanks for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydoke, and my special guest, Joe Ford, who is Joey on Twitter at DocOho, DocOho. See what he did there? And his podcast is called A Hamster with a Blunt Penknife, and is well worth your time. I'm grateful to Joe and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Liam Price, Ian Radford, Peter Reid, Paula Reynolds, Sean Reynolds, Richard Riley, Murray Robertson, Roger 1966, Alex Rowan, Ronin, Darren Rule, John Rumfit, Gavin Rymill, Tom Salinsky, Nick Salmond, Edward Salt, Samuel No Surname, Frank Shales, Christopher Sharp, Jack Sharp, John Sheehan, Scott Sherritt, Gavin Skinner, Darcy Smart, Dale Smith, David Smith, Giles Smith, Trevor Smith, Richard Smith, and Andrew Snedden. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you too would like to be a patron, you can go to patreon.com/Toby Haydoke, where for as little as £3 a month you get advance releases. You should be about 6 months in advance with Happy Times and Places, although the gap has actually fallen a little bit, so I'm gonna drag out the public releases a little bit more in order to widen that gap. So it should get back to normal, and you being about 6 months ahead with Happy Times and Places, and a couple of episodes ahead with Indefinable Magic and Too Much Information. But you also get your own podcast, Far Too Much Information, which is an exclusive, and you get monthly exclusive AMAs, behind the scenes looks at DVD and Blu-ray extras, little interviews that I might have done that might have tied in with something, all sorts of other bits and bobs, maybe a few things from my archive or a few little previews of this and that. It's fun to be there, and it's a nice crowd, and people say nice things and engage in nice bits of trivia where I might drop a brick or say something wrong or not have something clear. Somebody will be on hand to go, actually it's this, or what about that? And hey, it's nice. £3 a month. It goes up to as much as you want to pay, to be honest, but you can also get a 10% discount on the £3 and upwards if you sign up for a year in one go. If you'd rather just contribute every now and again, you can go to ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock, and you can pretend to buy me a coffee if you've particularly liked a podcast or have had a particularly good week, month or day. But of course, times are tough, and I understand if you are unwilling or unable to contribute financially. I'm just grateful that you listen. However, what you can do that costs you nothing is to go to all of the places on the internet where you can give 5-star ratings, and do that. And if there's a chance to give a few lines of review as well, that really helps to let other people know about these podcasts. You can also like and subscribe and do all of those other fancy things that just make me glimmer in the darkness of the internet so that lost travellers can find their way to me. Talking about the darkness of the internet, I'm on Twitter twice, just not a glutton for punishment, at Haydock Podcasts for all things to do with these podcasts, and at Toby Haydock to do with these podcasts and Doctor Who and the acting work that I do and the stuff I write and the comedy shows that I am a part of. I'm also on Instagram at toby.haydock. I have a Facebook page, Toby Haydock, and there's a YouTube channel too where these podcasts have started to be uploaded just automatically. So if you can go there as well and subscribe and thumbs up and do all of those sorts of things, it just helps, because they've only just gone up, so they look rather friendless at the moment. Well, that's an hour and 50 minutes. I think that's probably plenty. But overall, headline news, I enjoyed that. And my mum's been to South Africa to watch the cricket and said it's the most beautiful of countries. I've never been, but I suppose I've now got an excuse to go and spot places that Doctor Who was filmed. Ha ha ha. But yeah, Doctor Who has now added South Africa. I mean, I know it had before as well with Rosa and the Ghost Monument as well. But it's it's beautiful, beautiful looking place. But I've never been. I don't know if we have any listeners there, but if you are listening in South Africa, hello. There are listeners all over the world. I mean, most of them are in the United Kingdom, but it's nice to think that one reaches far out and into different climes and different cultures and civilizations and people. Whoever you are out there, thanks for listening, and especially if you're listening 1 hour and 40. Oh, actually, because this will be longer once I've added the theme tune and stuff like that. But yeah, 1 hour and 50 minutes or so into this, what is essentially a monologue. Oh, good Lord! But Bernard, my dog, is now sitting by me, looking up, hopefully, because I should have fed him 54 minutes ago, but I got carried away, and he's being a very good boy. But he wants his tea. So shall I feed you now, Bern? You want your tea? Yeah, when I say that, he does that little cocked head look that dogs do when they go, oh, I think he's just said something nice, but I don't want to get too carried away. You want your tea, Bern? Yeah, cocked head. So I'm going to go and do that now. Come on then, Bern. That was him going out. So I'm going to go and feed the dog. I hope this is... there we go. That's it. That's all I need. I can end on that. I'm going to feed the dog. Bye!